Welcome to the weekly Thread Insights group call. Hope everyone's having a great day. We have some items on the agenda today. Does anyone have any demo that they want to share that they forgot to add to the agenda? Oh, okay. We've got a few items for planning breakdown. I'll verbalize the first one because I added it. So we brought this to last week's meeting. Oh, there he is. I was going to say this came up in last week's meeting, but Matt wasn't there to answer questions. So we kind of deferred it for this week. So this issue is all about auto-resolving vulnerabilities that are no longer found in subsequent scans. Is there anyone? I see a few carrots on here. Thank you, Subhashish. I don't know if Mihao or Daniel, have you guys had a chance to look at this? Are you guys prepared to ask some questions? Dig into it a little bit?
I think the question we were discussing in the last meeting was like, what will happen after auto resolve with the issue links? And should we close those issue links or should we communicate somehow? And I think there is I was reading in the morning as well, like there is a comment from Andy, like it will come into the second iteration or something. But it needs to be decided. It's not decided yet. So it's kind of an open things we need to discuss.
Matt, do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I'm looking through for the comments. I almost feel like it's something that we should consider making a setting. I know, because then it kind of opens up the question of, if I've created the issue from the vulnerability, that's pretty clear, but what if I've related issues to the vulnerability and link things together? And I know our linking is a little bit looser than like the MRs to issues. Not everybody may want to see those closed in that way. So I don't know. I think for now, we just leave it alone. People can clean it up. And if we decide that it's worth adding that as an additional behavior or, a setting, if we can address it in the future. But for now, yeah, let's just leave it like if you were to resolve a vulnerability today, it doesn't do anything to the issues. It leaves the links and it leaves them in whatever state they're in. So I think the auto resolve will just be the same thing.
Does anybody know what shows in the linked issue history? Could we just say, hey, a linked vulnerability here has been resolved? So if you go to the issue, you can see at the bottom that the event. Mihal loves my idea, I can tell. That's a terrible idea. Let's not do that.
Well, this is a great idea, but I don't think we have the technical infrastructure to do this. I mean, if we had the state transition mechanism, we could create a note saying that, hey, the vulnerability has transitioned to a resolved state or a dismissed state. Would you like to close this issue? Yes, no, or whatever. But now I don't think we have the technical capacity to like detect. Well, we could modify the dismissal service that we use to automatically create notes in the relevant issues, but it's going
I think I've blocked this on the vulnerabilities feedback anyway, if that's your concern. And somebody might want to check that it is indeed blocked, but I think it is.
Now that we are talking about this particular feature, I'm seriously considering that we should like deprecate it like really fast, really.
Yeah, it's high up in the list of priorities. As soon as we, like, if you don't count the stuff that's already in flight, it's probably the top priority because it's blocking now 3 features.
Yeah, going back to the automatical resolving of the vulnerabilities, I am not sure. This is an open question because I think Lucas, Charles, and Ross, I think, did some work in the fingerprinting department. So they were trying to do some additional algorithms to determine whether the vulnerability is not present in the subsequent scans, which would allow us to get better results. Because if I recall correctly, we've been getting some false positives in that department. So I think that if we enable automatical resolving of vulnerabilities when they are not found in the subsequent scans right now, we are going to get many false positives. I'm afraid of that. And if I recall correctly, the feature that Lucas was working on was called basically fingerprinting. It was fingerprinting the vulnerability findings with priorities. So you could like have different algorithms to fingerprint the vulnerability finding, and it would try to match them according to the highest priority algorithm and the rest of them to see if that's the same vulnerability. But it turned out that we had to disable it because it was far too complex and it took far too much time to process any kind of report. We had very high pressure on the store report service, and we had to put it behind a feature flag. So this was an idea to improve our accuracy while determining if the vulnerability is not present in the subsequent scan, but it turned out to be far too slow. So yeah, that's my concern here.
Because Miho, is it any worse than today where, I mean, the problem is, let's say that I have a static analysis pass and it finds, 50 things, and somebody goes in and moves a couple lines of code around. Today, I would end up with 50 things that are already in my vulnerability report that may show up as no longer detected, but then I get 50 new ones in the feature branch. So it's already not great today. So if we have the auto resolved, even if we don't improve the accuracy of the tracking, it at least kind of takes care of the cleanup of the problems of the sort of the dumb line-based fingerprinting today. Or is there a separate concern? Maybe I misunderstood.
Well, no, the point you raise is valid. The question I would answer with is like, do we have a bigger priority on accuracy, or do we have bigger priority on having the feature be easily adopted? Because automatically closing it as you describe and with low accuracy as we currently have it is going to basically have people end up with hundreds of automatically closed vulnerabilities, which might ease the adoption part, but we are going to get questions. So can you improve the accuracy now?
Well, I think we're actually kind of in the reverse spot of what you say, is that people already don't like the accuracy of the fingerprinting, and that's a known problem. And they're kind of going, can't you please close these automatically? I have hundreds or thousands of them. So even once we do improve the accuracy, there seems to be a philosophical difference between teams that want to review everything and teams that say, you know what, I trust the scanners. If the scanner says it's not there, I want to close it out. I'll assume a developer fixed it, or maybe we applied a patch, upgraded a module, whatever it is. I don't want to spend people time looking at stuff that has gone away. So I think it solves a very immediate need. And then while the scanner teams improve the fingerprinting accuracy, the feature still has the same amount of benefit going forward.
Okay.
And it's opt-in, Michal. If you want to review everything, don't turn on the feature.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense. Just wanted to make sure that that's the flow we want to go with.
So, Daniel, do you have any questions from a front-end perspective? Have you had a chance to look at the experience and the changes with the front end?
Yeah, I just had a look. It looks pretty straightforward. I think we will run into some issues with testing this because it's one of those things where it requires a pretty specific setup before you can test it. Then after you run the test, you have to basically repeat the process again to get back to the testable state. But just from like an implementation perspective, it looks fairly straightforward.
So
Cool.
Matt, just to be clear, like we are not concerned about post MVC features right now. So like there are 3 concerns. So we are only concerned about like MVC for now. If things comes, we will consider those, right?
Yeah, so things like the
Okay.
automatic closing of the issues, these are things that we can worry about later. I
Okay.
would keep just what we've got in scope for right now.
Okay, cool.
And to be honest, I suspect that in a very large percentage of cases, teams that are going to want to use the auto opt-in feature, it's probably for a lot of the vulnerabilities that are not getting automatically fixed and closed. So there's not going to be issues that are associated with a lot of these.
Should we iterate through our planning breakdown questions and see if we can move this on to implementation issue creation and refinement? I hear no no's, so I'm going to ask them. Are the requirements clear enough to understand the intent of the request? Does anyone feel like there's not clear enough requirements? We need to get more answers. I see some thumbs. Daniel's shaking his head, but I think he means no, you don't need any more clarification. That's what I thought. No pressure though. If you felt that way, I want you to express it.
No pressure. That's how I feel.
Okay. Do we know the dependencies of the work to be accomplished? I see some shaking heads. I'm going to the yes. And this is a big one. Is this small? If we were to ignore every other thing that's on our plate in one milestone, would we be able to complete the entirety of this work in one iteration?
I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to vote no.
You're going to say no. Mihai, what do you think?
I'd say no.
Okay. Let's talk about ways that we can break this down a little further then and have whether it's 2 MVCs or an iterative approach. Any thoughts on that?
Well,
Sorry, you go, Michal.
so my initial idea was to create a very naive approach here to like just close everything as it goes, enable it, put it under a feature flag, enable it on GitLab.com and see how that behaves. Or on a smaller project, of course, then maybe the good pilot. And then we can think of adding a per project toggle for that behavior, enabling it for a bigger percentage and like rolling it out incrementally. But first we need to try the naive approach of like close everything and see how that first. So
Yeah,
that
it saves the front end work. On the back end though, but sorry, just to say what I was going to say before, I don't believe there's a simpler MVC. So Matt hasn't said anything. I'm thinking this is as simple as it gets. Is there anything else in the back end or that we want to discuss, or should we take this asynchronously and assign a DRI to go and answer the planning breakdown, like the proposed implementation issues? Are we still doing that, Lindsay? You look.
We are. I'm sorry. I was still trying to understand Mihai's suggestion. So what I heard was that we weren't ready to go forward with the creation of the implementation issues because this is large. And if there's a way that we can break it down into smaller pieces, because this is the way we've defined how we graduate from the planning breakdown discussion to the next step of creating implementation issues. If there's just no way to do that and we just have this very large thing on our hands, that's fine. But Mihai, I didn't fully understand what your suggestion was. So I want to make sure I understand that before we just say that, hey, I don't think we can break this down anymore.
I'm basically saying that we should like do the very, very minimal approach to this and enable it for just in backend under a feature flag and see how that behaves, see if that solves some of our problems, and then we can iterate on that.
Almost like a spike.
Kind of.
It saves the backend from having to implement the storage for the toggle, and it saves the front end from having to do the
The interface for that.
the clickety click.
What does everybody think? What does everyone else think of that idea? I think it makes a lot of sense. I've heard some feedback recently that when backend APIs get created way in advance, there's been times where the front end doesn't necessarily either have exactly what they need or understand it entirely. So if we do take that approach, I think it'd be great to have a front end DRI who gets early review and input on the API that gets created as part of this phase.
I like.
So I don't think that necessarily needs another epic. It seems like what you just described, Mihao, would be an issue under the epic that we already have for this, and it would just be sort of the blocking task for everything else. Does that sound right?
Sounds reasonable.
So given that, and this it is sort of maybe get your toes wet or ease into this a little bit. Do we feel like we should move this out of planning? Or I don't want to say out of planning breakdown and into refinement. They've kind of got this weird limbo in between. Like we've had the planning breakdown discussion and we're creating the implementation issues before they get refined. Are we ready to move this to the implementation issue creation portion of planning breakdown?
Yes.
I think we are.
Excellent. So Tiago, do we want to nominate DRIs for this? Do you want to ask for volunteers?
I was gonna bring up what I had in 3A1, just to say that there's a few things still ahead of this. So I don't know if it's too early to pick DRIs or if we can pick them asynchronously. And I don't expect anyone to write implementation issues this milestone. Matt, what was your expectation as the priority czar?
Priorities are. I want a nameplate for my desk that says that.
I'm mailing you
laugh
one.
at me. No, I mean, Tiago, you make a really good point. It is number 11 on the list. I was kind of wanting to get visibility on this ahead of time, but I don't see this probably picking up before 14.2 at the earliest. Some of this work, and yeah, we do have half the list feels like it's just blockers that are all sort of chained up to that fingerprint.
Cool. So I'll pick back a backend DRI in the coming week or so. I'm saying this because I know Mihao is at half capacity this milestone. He's away the next milestone, and then to be decided whether or not he returns. And yeah, I need to take that into consideration, picking who goes in there.
Okay, we'll do the same with the front end DRI as well. It just dawned on me that we shouldn't have started with this topic. We should have started with topic B that Tiago added because it's actually an item that is in 14.1. So this is what happens when I don't look down the list of the agenda before we just jump right in. We also have
time.
the 14.1 kickoff that we are going to try to do today, which we might not have time for, but we can do that asynchronously. Maybe you and I can record it, Tiago. So do we want to move on to item 3B now? Go ahead.
BUC. Matt, do you have a preference? We can probably do both.
Let's go ahead and do B. Because C is, I think that one is going to be a really straightforward kind of a gimme one.
So I was nosing around on B, which is the API to create the manual vulnerability. It's an API, anything can use it. But I was nosing in the MR as I usually do, and I noticed that some of the fields are mandatory. And then looking at the designs, some of those fields were not in the UI, meaning we're going to have to hard code them or expose them in the UI. And I think Mihao has answered. So if Matt is okay with that suggestion, then we can move on to C.
Yeah, I was kind of halfway through my response and the issue on that one. I kind of like more having sort of the added via API or something like that. I guess I have less strong feelings about what we call the scan type and the scanner name, just that I want to be able to make sure we can distinguish something that was created purely via API versus in that form at a later date.
Yeah, you had asked that before. That's a nice way to do it. And if somebody happens to create a scanner that's called created via API, then
Nothing we can
Well,
do
and
with that.
please don't do that, anyone.
there was that other related discussion around coming up with the enum for, I don't even remember what it was now.
Report type.
Detection method.
Detection
method.
method.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Is that something that we could use here, or are those additional fields in place of this? So it almost doesn't matter. Maybe we should just hard code everything to generic API.
I'm afraid not. I mean, the scanner is a different entity altogether, so I'd rather not stick detection method there because I'm going to get many questions asked by reviewers why are we sticking this thing where it doesn't obviously belong to. So, well, my proposition was to add the scanner type other and scanner name manually added via API. So if someone decides to change that, it's their own problem. But if someone uses the API, then we should be able to filter out those vulnerabilities later on.
Perfect. So the detection method fields that we were talking about in that enum would be additional net new
Yes.
fields, or yes. Okay, perfect. So then we can use that to get more granular information about where things came from in the future.
Yeah, the additional point I wanted to raise here is that we should have the scanner type manual because I think this is a perfectly valid value for a scanner type. I mean, sometimes people manually find vulnerabilities, and this sometimes happens, and this should be an option there. So that's why I kind of didn't agree with the manual scanner type.
Yeah, that makes sense. Although,
So
oh, go ahead, Dion.
I was gonna say, in reading, trying to understand the model, there's scanner type, report type, scanner name, and now detection method. I think, Daniel, you answered my question in an issue or Slack that the drop down, you were there as well, Lindsay, the drop down on the UI, the filter, that has its own enum in the front end. So if we do add the scanner type order in the back end, do we want that added to the front end as well?
For now, I'd say we don't expose that we don't expose that at all. It's going to be hard coded in the service object, a service class, which is going to handle the creation itself, and we're not going to expose that to the API for now. If we decide we want that.
Sorry, as a user, if we do what you're saying, the only way for me to see manually created vulnerabilities is to select all scanners then.
Oh, you want, okay. I misunderstood your question. I thought do we want to expose the scanner type in the manual API creation? If we want to expose the scanner type in the filtering screen, yeah, that's what we want to do.
Right, so what would it, I mean, is this already included in the design? What would we see there, Matt?
Oh, I have to go back to the comment discussion on that. What I thought we had talked about having something there that actually said like manual or external. I don't know, Daniel, do you remember?
I'm afraid this is going to be a different problem here.
All right, and I just looked through all the designs. The 9th one talks about the activity filter, but nothing with the scanner filter. So I don't know if we've covered that, at least not from what I see.
Yeah, I don't recall there being a design to pick the scanner type.
I mean, we don't need a design. We need a decision from Matt or user experience. What do you want to show? The dropdown is there. It's adding an item to the dropdown. Am I oversimplifying?
This filter has had a lot of changes recently and a lot of feedback and a lot
It's
of
simple.
questions.
Daniel can do it.
Yeah,
Daniel
just
is an expert.
Say really quickly, Matt, and like we'll roll with it.
For me, I think we broke him.
We take it offline. Did I
just
break the meeting?
I just realized that when Tiago started talking about the scanner type, I realized he's talking about the vulnerability list when you can filter those. And then I realized that what we are essentially adding now is detection method, which would be an different filter. Which kind of makes it hard because right now, if we add a scanner type of other or manual or whatever, we will expose it in the user interface, but we don't have the ability to filter through scanner names, if I recall correctly. So you're going, if you have any vulnerabilities that have been created with a scanner type of other, but were not created by the API, but something else, then they are going to show there up as well. I think we should take this async, I'm afraid.
Okay, who's picking it up with the either a propose yeah?
That's
You're gonna noodle and throw something in the issue, or
I'm gonna to think of something. I'm going to try to come up with a decent idea to like have the user experience be reasonable. Because if we add yet another filter to the scanner name, I don't think anyone is going to have any idea how that works. Lindsay, you're muted.
I haven't been watching Daniel's reaction to this because I think he might know how this is going to work and how this might play out and have some warnings to heed around this. But if there's a way that we can find a solution that doesn't overload the scanner filter anymore, I think that would benefit us all.
Yeah, I don't really have much thoughts at this point.
all right. Thank you and apologies.
No, you're right. You're
Do you have time for
very-
C?
We don't. We only have 1 minute left, so we're going to have to save that for next week. As far as the kickoff goes, I think if Tiago and I can just share very helpful posts in Slack, or record a very small video, him and I can conspire on that later, and we'll find an async way to cover that. We need to do the same thing for container security, Tiago, because that call got canceled today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know. So, all right, everybody. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it. Bye.